Hello, this is the voice of Stewart Pearce, and welcome to Deep Dialogues, a series of vital conversations that I have with global soul stewards from all over the world who provide us with an understanding of how we can create a new hierarchy of values that is absolutely significant at this unique time of becoming. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening. Always slightly disturbing hearing one's own voice on the outside of one. Pam, welcome, welcome, welcome. Everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. We have the most wonderful guest this evening for Deep Dialogues. As you see, this beautiful lady sitting in front of us, Pam Gregory. And Pam, you're in the New Forest, aren't you?
Yes, I am. It's beautiful. Just exquisite today because the light was so clear and bright. I just gloried in it. It was wonderful. Yeah, I'm very lucky to be surrounded by a lot of trees here and ponies and donkeys, and that's wonderful.
I was in the New Forest many, many years ago when we were building Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. We wanted to find oak that was 450 years ago. And indeed, the master woodsman found some in the New Forest, and we built the globe out of English oak, apart from the two trees that hold the heavens and the earth together on stage, and one was Scots and one was Welsh. Well, welcome everybody, and let me introduce you to dear Pam by giving you a little bit of her wonderful bio. So apparently, this wonderful lady discovered astrology by accident at the age of 21. And consequently became fascinated by the art of astrological reading and has been doing this for over 40 years. Whilst living in different areas of the world, Pam has become well known as a highly popular go-to astrologer with her wonderfully grounded approach. And I note from your YouTube channel that you are an extremely well investigated astrologer, meaning you have very, very high numbers for all of your videos. So it's absolutely wonderful that people are tuning into your force. So as you've just discovered, today Pam is running a very busy practice in the New Forest in the south of England and has a very active YouTube channel entitled Pam Gregory Astrology. Pam is also an author, an authoress of 2 books, You Don't Really Believe in Astrology, Do You? And the best-selling How to Co-Create Using the Secret Language of the Universe. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Joy to be with you, Stuart.
Wonderful to have you here. Well, having just heard that little sketch of a very illustrious life that you've had, that you're having, what is the heart and the soul of astrology for you?
Well, I think for me, it's a sacred language of divine intelligence that enables us to live with a deeper sense of meaning. And meaning, of course, is so vital to feel that your life is valuable. And right now, particularly with the current situation and people having very tough times, lockdown, having lost businesses, etc., that there can be a pervading sense of meaninglessness for many people. But what astrology can do is to give you this greater sense of purpose and divine organizing intelligence behind everything. Even if times are tough, you can see the message behind why we have to go through tough times to often get us to a better place. So the birth chart really is a kind of interpenetration of this language, this sacred language of divine intelligence, to intersecting with your concrete life on this earth. It's like crosswires in a compass. And that's what is so wonderful. So when I have sessions with clients from the birth chart, I can really very clearly see what the issues are that have prompted them to come to me, whether it's in the area of money or health or relationships or whatever. Now, I won't know what the specific events and experiences are. I'm not working psychically in that way, but I will very clearly understand the underpinnings of the archetypes and the geometry that have probably brought them to me. And so it's really in those discussions that I can help them to see that whatever is playing out in their lives is partly purposeful for them, but if they lived those planetary archetypes at a higher level of being, life could be more comfortable and actually even more magnificent. Because an analogy I've used a lot, and this will echo with your world too, Stewart, is that the birth chart is your unique sheet of music, because it will never be repeated in history again, that particular pattern. And so that says all of us are special because it's unique, but it doesn't really state what level of consciousness you could live it at. So it gives you the pattern, but the frequency is down to our level of consciousness. So you can play your music in a corner or an old tin box and have a very small life, or you can be lead violinist in an international orchestra and have a magnificent life and shine your life on the world, shine your light on the world. So it is, I think it is hugely illuminating for people to help them understand their purpose and their meaning and what their particular pattern is in this lifetime, because it's very crystallizing and validating for them very often.
Amazing. So if Mr. World came to you for a reading right now and said, "Dear Pam, I've lost the meaning for my existence," what would you say to Mr. World?
Well, I would do several hours of preparation on the chart, because I don't just sit down and do it, would that it was so easy. But I do several hours of preparation going through all the layers, because this is like a kind of, because it's such a interlocking series of archetypes and geometry. It's like I hesitate to use the word matrix, but it's like a 97-dimensional jigsaw, as it were. So I have to analyze all those layers, and then it starts to come alive as a kind of humming hologram of meaning for me. Then it becomes very clear. And because it's unique to each individual, I've got to do that individual preparation. But then it becomes very exciting, because by then I'm starting to read it literally as music, not just analysis. So, and then I'm able to sort of help people. And it's interesting, we were talking just before the show about the ancient Greeks, for instance, and you'll probably be aware, Stuart, that Plato had a theory of the world or of reality, that divine organizing intelligence was at obviously the highest level, as what he called the world of being, the pure world of potential and being. And your birth chart is indeed pure potential. It's wave that has not yet become particle until you start to live it out. And then beneath the world of being, very close to it, he saw the planetary archetypes, because he's an astrologer, obviously. And then below that, kind of collapsing into a world of becoming, which is our world of decay and death and linear time, etc. And this is the world, if we're living at the 3D level, the rubber hits the road, this is the level we're living at. But he believed, and humbly I'd suggest I also believe, that in going through a chart consultation, you can raise people closer to that divine organizing intelligence, to that original sacredness of being, rather than just the rubber hitting the road. And the archetypes, to me, are almost like, if you imagine life as a tapestry, each of the archetypes, which are so incredibly different from each other. Mars is god of war, and Saturn is the teacher and the disciplinarian, and Uranus is the maverick that smashes it all up. They're very different, but they become kind of eternal archetypes, like the warp in a tapestry. And then we weave the fabric, the weft of life around those pillars. And as I say, when people come to me, I can't see their weft, but I can see their warp. And the fact that it gives them an underlying meaning of pattern and sense, even if it's tough, I think is massively reassuring.
It's an amazing analogy, but I'm also aware of the fact that it's quite a select analogy. Could you just perhaps give a definition for the weft and the warp? Okay,
so the warp, each of the, I'm sort of thinking of almost a what you call them for a tapestry, an old loom or whatever. And each of the planetary archetypes represents a pillar or a strand in that loom. So as I say, there are many planetary archetypes. One is Mars, that's your god of war, that's your assertiveness, your drive, your goal setting, your physicality. Then you have Saturn, which is your discipline and how much you kind of obey the rules and play the conventional game and put hard work in when it's necessary. Then there's Uranus, which is the maverick, and that's when you want to kind of, you can see Uranian people because they're almost electric. They've got this very high vibe energy because they're geniuses very often, if their Uranus is very strong, because they're bringing progressive ideas to the world, but they want to smash up the old to bring in the new. We have a lot of that in the coming years. And then there's Neptune, which is to do with spirituality and altered states, and on we go through all the archetypes. And so they form the pillars in the loom, if you like, the warp, but they are all in different relationship to each other depending on that individual's birth chart.
So if you were to give just a classical definition of weft and warp, just in a few words, a weft is?
The weft is kind of the events and experiences in life. In this analogy I'm using, just the day-to-day. Yeah,
that's fine. Just because it's elitist language, so I'm just wondering if it helps. It's select language. It's the language of an authority like yourself. But does Mr. and Mrs. World understand it? So back to my analogy of Mr. World coming along to you. As you just sort of look at Mr. World at the moment, who is a little bit woebegone, and evidently through the wonder of what you've just shared with us, you would create a matrix, if I may use that word, that will allow Mr. World to understand what his meaning is. Am I right in saying that through that deliberation, what you're actually doing is really allowing the individual, Mr. World in this case, to understand the matrix of their soul?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And that is partly, of course, dependent on their frequency. As I say, the chart gives you the pattern, it doesn't give the frequency, but the more conscious we are in our lives, the higher our level of consciousness, which of course is about how much light we can hold in our bodies, then the more we will start to appreciate that this is very much our soul's expression. And it's very interesting, Stuart, because I follow a particular ascended master, Zachariah, who I followed for many years, channeled by the very gifted Janet Trellower. And some months ago, he said something very interesting. He said that your soul chooses the moment to be born very precisely within a window of 2 minutes to either side and within 5 kilometers. So if you're going to be born on the side of a motorway, you will be born on the side of a motorway because that's your birth chart for this lifetime by your soul's choice. And that's very helpful for people who have had a really grim childhood, really tough, as many of my clients have, because that's when they tend to come to astrologers, if to make sense of it. And I think it can be very helpful to say to those people, look, this is a kind of Google God question, really. But if we assume this was your soul's choice, and I can clearly see that childhood experience, I can see your relationship with your mother, your father, what were the issues? Was it supportive and loving? Was your father sexually abusing you? At what age? You can see all of that. Then you can help them to see that burden of childhood they may have been carrying all those decades wasn't just jolly bad luck. It was actually planned fuel or fertilizer to make them go on a deeper journey to ultimately come full circle to shine more light on the world, possibly to other people who'd had sexual abuse problems in their childhood, whatever the profound empathy was. So the grim childhoods have purpose, even though they're horribly uncomfortable for many of us, but they have purpose. And many of the great thought leaders of our time, spiritual leaders, have had really, really tough times in life because it takes you deeper. And so that can be very helpful. And of course, what you were describing for Mr. World is really a branch of astrology that I'm very interested in, called mundane astrology. And that doesn't mean it's boring, because it's actually incredibly interesting. It means mundus, of the world. And you can look at charts of countries, etc. But for instance, 2020 was going to be a very, very tough year, because we had this on the 12th of January last year, 2020, we had a conjunction between Saturn and Pluto. And whenever you look back in history, they happen at tough times. 1933 to 35, we had that. That wasn't too jolly a time, as we all know. 9/11, that was another hard. It was an opposition between Saturn and Pluto. So if you look back historically, there are often times when there are much greater constrictions in life, rules and regulations, contraction, vice-like circumstances, often hard times economically. So astrologers knew this was going to be a very tough year, because that was going to be like striking the tuning fork for the whole of 2020. We didn't know what the event was. As I say, again, that's part of the weft, the particular experience would be, but we knew what the qualities of energy would be. That's a better way to put it, maybe, qualities of energy. And so that has played out through 2020. And we're moving into 2021, which has very different energy, really, because one of the main purposes, and this is looking at it in a very big canvas, but one of the main purposes of last year was to really accelerate the collapse of the old order. And the old order are they're top-down systems. They're systems of many kinds, be they governmental, legal, educational.
It's the 5 establishments, isn't it? We can just title it that. Literally.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they tend to be top-down. They tend to be vertical in their structure.
Because they're patriarchal.
Yes, absolutely.
If they were matriarchal, if they were the matrix, they would be horizontalized.
Indeed. And that's where we're headed. We're moving from Capricorn energy, which is top down, we're moving gradually into Aquarian energy. We're into some of that already. And that's much more moving from centralization to decentralization, grassroots up, much more horizontal, holding hands across the world. We're all in this together as a global humanity. That's sort of a feeling of sharing, collaboration. And partly the whole virus situation has brought up massive compassion for other people. So all our values are changed. We don't want stuff anymore. We want to care for people, who are having. So, but this collapse of the old order is going to continue, I believe, until 2024. And this will happen where people in power or systems in power have lacked integrity and accountability and transparency. If they're squeaky clean, no problem. If they're not, that will become very apparent. And this is 2021, one of the big themes is disclosure. Things coming to light, which may be very surprising, may be very shocking, and accelerate the collapse of the old order of all those kinds, the 5 establishments.
Fascinating. And so, suddenly I see Mr. World is rather like an extraordinary sieve with all of these cosmic energies being filtered through to allow Mr. World an understanding of deeper meaning, because after all, Mr. World is forlorn because of calamity and catastrophe, understandable events that have brought about a winnowing, a weakening, a quivering on a very, very deep level. And so back to what you was just sharing with us, and thereby we become aware of the deep frequencies of karma, and recognize that actually the soul has an intelligence which is far superior to the nature of what we recognize human intelligence to be, and that feeling is the language of the soul. So we can begin to find a way of being able to identify what the karma is, atone the karma, which is always humbling and reverential, because it allows us to feel that we are part of a transcendental intelligence within the cosmos.
Which is amazing.
Which is
amazing. And we're feeling it more and more strongly. We're moving into that kind of age where we can become more conscious of it. Yeah.
This is, I mean, this is right at the heart of all the work that I do, what we're describing. And of course, the wonder was that I just wanted to repeat the imagery that you were using. Well, actually, for you, I think I sense it to be a technology in your work, but how a chart, a birth chart, can give patterning, but it can't reveal frequency. And that's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So, because it brings in the auger of free will.
Absolutely. And that's where our latitude is. That's what our lives are about, really. You know, if you imagine we're here as in a school, we are here to learn to become more conscious and more evolved and to hold more light in the body. And you may well be aware, Stuart, but what is really exciting about this, even though, you know, the world seems to have been in a mess over the last year, what is really exciting is that the cosmology of what we're experiencing is profound, because roughly every 12,000 years, give or take about 500 either side, our solar system moves into an area of space which is called the photon belt. And what has also been happening for our Earth is, for many, many years, we've had the buffer, almost think of it as a cotton wool buffer of the magnetic cloud, which has protected the Earth from a lot of cosmic and galactic energy. That has really fallen very dramatically. So we are much more open to the cosmic and galactic energies, and we're passing through this big, big area of space called the photon belt. And you can actually see it on a clear day like today, which was beautiful. The light is very white. It's not soft golden as it used to be, it's very white. And that is photonic light. So these, this gamma ray and neutrino energy, which is new to us, we've never had this in our lifetimes, pouring into the Earth, upgrading every cell in our body, upgrading our DNA, and either activating, or some would say reactivating, the strands of our DNA, because we only thought we had 2 that were active and the rest were junk. Well, that's going to take us to a very different place of what we probably call superhuman abilities now, of telepathy and healing and just a sense of knowing. You'd have to read a book. You just, as you do, Stuart, in your meditations, you just kind of tune into the field and bang, you get the information. More and more of us with our raised frequency are going to be able to do that, because with these massive waves of light pouring in, it is enabling all of us to hold more light in the body, and therefore that is equivalent to the raising of consciousness.
Wonderful, thank you. And also for that downloading of light, for that infiltration of light, the light triggers subatomic particles within the cells to awaken. Hence, what your reference towards the fact that we have a 12 helix DNA within our bodies, but we're only living 2. And so we know that as a result of that, we will begin to remember past life experience, and the opening of the superpowers to do with telepathy, teleportation, precognition, supernatural healings, etc., walking on water, all of the things that we know that the great avatars or avadutes have always been able to access, that super consciousness. It's interesting, at the moment there's a series, you've probably seen it being advertised online, and it's called Super Beings.
No, I'd love to watch that, actually.
Interviewing human beings who are considered to be super beings, such as Deepak and blah, 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 blah. I thought it was really interesting, because from one point of view, imaginatively, it's extremely innovative, because it's giving us that sense of future promise, that we can acquire this information if we... I mean, my strong belief is that the era of data collection is over, which is a facile thing to say. But what I mean is that we need a new way of being with information, and that we have so much information, and yet our behaviors are so atrocious. And that what we need to do is to really recalibrate what our behaviors are all about. So on one level, there are many paradigms being put forward by the super beings. And yet it's such an elitist thing to say, you are a super being, which means that I'm merely normal, or I'm a sub being. As opposed to, well, no, we're actually all super beings. beings. It's just that what we're seeing is that there are, as a result of karmic promise, there are a number of individuals who arrived with awakened slipstreams of energy that they can bring at this time to the fore to awaken what is necessary. I mean, they really are living the zeitgeist, many of them. But of course, they've been through lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes of purification and atonement, which allows them to be open to these frequencies. So it's wonderful because it's again putting responsibility fully into our own hearts of, no, it is not done to you. It's not happening to you. This is a response to your own intelligence. You know, that it was almost as though consciousness were a screen. It's not happening. It's responding to you. So what are your thoughts and feelings going to be?
Yes.
How did all of this begin with you? I mean, astrology was I know you had a corporate career as well, didn't you?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I got into astrology, as you said right at the beginning, at the age of 21. I emigrated to Canada after university. In the first week, it must have been a massive week for personal growth. I joined a yoga class. At the end, a couple of the girls in the class said, "That chap over there is an astrologer." He was a wonderful big guy from Jamaica. And I went over and said, "Look, I know nothing about astrology. I'd love you to do my chart." And I saw him a week later and spent 7 hours with him, and it just blew my mind. You know, this whole dimension of meaning just cracked open. And he went back in my life and told me about dates and all kinds of qualities of experience that he couldn't possibly have known about. And that really changed my life. I was smitten from that point on. And what was quite amusing was, over the next few years, because in those days, we're talking a long time ago, Stuart, he did the recording on a tape and I lost the tape. And after 5 years of severe winters in Toronto, I decided to return to England. I was packing up boxes and about to get on a plane later that day, and I found the tape. So I was playing the tape as I was packing boxes, and on the tape it said, "The 4th of September 1979 will be a major turning point in your life," and that day was and he said, "By the end of October, you'll be at one of the major highs of your life." And at the end of October, I was sitting at 19,000 feet in the Himalayas. So I thought, there's something in this funny old subject called astrology. So from that point on, I was just voracious to learn. So although I had a corporate career for 35 years, it was kind of every weekend, evenings, studying. I studied with the Faculty for Astrological Studies for 8 years, part-time, because I was working crazy, crazy hours in London in the corporate world, in advertising at that point. Then I did a master's course. But to be honest, I learn every day. It's so vast, Stuart. You never say, "Okay, I've cracked it." You know, I know, never, and therefore it's very humbling, I think. And you know, the whole new waves of information coming in about it that are so exciting. So I'm always the student, and in beginner's mind, if you like.
There's a curious coincidence going on here, because September the 4th, 1979 was one of the greatest turning points in my life. When I was living in September the 4th, 5th and 6th, I was living in New York City, working as an actor. I got a movie and I was moving to Los Angeles, and I was packing up the apartment. There you were, packing boxes. I was packing boxes, and the telephone rang, and the whole of the atmosphere went into a slow motion. One of the most extraordinary metaphysical experiences. I answered the telephone because, of course, as we know, this was before cell phones. And the landline, that was my brother saying, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, you know what I'm doing. I'm packing up boxes to move to Los Angeles. Are you sitting down? I need to tell you that Mum's got terminal cancer and she has 3 months to live. What are you going to do about it?" So in that moment, I decided I have to let the movie go and I have to come back to Europe and be with her. Our father had died 3 years prior, but we both my brother and I had an immense soul connection with my mother. So it was a sort of natural rite of passage to honor that. As it happens, she lasted for a whole year and then passed in the latter part of 1980. But that's when my career changed, you see. Then I became a voice coach. And, you know, instead of being an actor, I thought I was going to become the greatest actor of the 20th century. Anyway, so I just wanted to give, you know, a sort of grounded, you know, one of those anecdotal stories that indicates the immense velocity of what you're talking about, the gravitas of what you're talking about, that it's absolutely quintessential, that it really does impinge, the wisdoms that you have, the insights that you have about the technology of astrology impinge on our lives in an immensely consequential way. I know one of the fascinating things that you are engaged in are not just simply what's happening terrestrially. I mean by that, of course, that you're working extraterrestrially in looking at all of the constellations and how they impinge on our lives on planet Earth in a terrestrial way. But you also go beyond that into the photonic belts and beyond. And you were mentioning earlier the Kuiper?
Kuiper belt, yes.
Kuiper.
This rocky belt in space, really beyond the orbits of Neptune and Pluto. And just one step back, because I think it's quite helpful. I think we're moving into an age with this understanding of cosmology and physics and the high frequency light. We are blending science and spirituality now. We've got a much clearer scientific underpinning for what I do day to day. It's no longer woo-woo. We've got some, very solid science with the cosmology and the light and how that's affecting us, all of us as human beings, how much light we can hold. But yes, the Kuiper belt is of great interest to me because over the last 20 years or so, which is no time, it's a drop in the bucket in terms of time, there have been several, they're either called Kuiper belt objects and haven't been given a delineation of any kind, or they're called dwarf planets. And they are really magical because they have a very different quality to the other planets which we're very familiar with, my bread and butter, because all of them are quantum in their understanding. They don't talk about, like Saturn isn't to do with linear chronology, linear time and pushing and effort and writing business plans and taking years to make things happen. They're about a jump in energy and state of being to manifest a very different reality for yourself. So they're quantum, they're discontinuous in their energy, and they live really in a realm of no time. Time does not, it's the eternal now, it's dropping into the moment. So we're going to gradually lose this sense of clock time. I don't know what that'll do to birth charts. Now I calculate those, but anyway, we'll think about that another day. But into...
I mean, there will always be the reference of the movement of the spheres, won't there? So what we will do is recognate time as that's really what you're saying, that the concept of time today, which is a ruling principle of our lives, this was not the case 450 years ago, Pam.
Yes, exactly.
We did not live our lives by this or the clock. We lived our lives by the movement of the sundial. We lived our lives by the movement of the skies. And of course, everybody was aware of it. This was before the noise, by the way.
Exactly, of course, because they had no other entertainment. Which is
a huge preoccupation of mine, because today we live against machines. And when we go back 450 years ago, there weren't any machines.
And of course, they were living open to the skies, whether you look at ancient Egyptian culture, ancient Greek, the Mayan cultures, those pyramids were really celebrating the constellations as a universal language. So, we're going to become more galactic citizens. So these archetypes for these dwarf planets, and what I'll abbreviate to KBOs, are quantum. Most of them are linked to creational energy. Creator gods, ancient indigenous tribes, their concept of creator gods. So many of them are very regenerative. For instance, one is called Haumea, Haumea, and she's linked to the Hawaiian goddess of fertility, who could just birth babies from all over her body and regenerate herself from an old woman to a young maiden. She could just regenerate nature where it was laid waste by poor agricultural practices and produce food and seafood. And so she has this magical shamanic quality, and all of them have a very deep instinctive understanding and connection to nature as well. So they're magical, they're quantum, they're creator energy, they're regenerative energy, and they are incredibly exciting in terms of, I think they represent an evolution of consciousness.
Unquestionably, through the way that you describe.
A new dimension of consciousness.
Although you're talking about quanta, that is, and you're dealing with these wonderful images of, for example, how they connect with what we see represented within shamanism, within the honoring of the earth and all of its sentience. Actually, what we're really talking about, it seems, is that there's a creation of a new vibrational field,
yes,
which will expand our consciousness into a much greater sense of connectivity and the inclusivity of oneness. So that we see the interrelationship. You know that expression that we used to do about connecting the dots? So the dots were actually individual positions living somewhere within the consciousness of the universe, but actually all the dots are interconnected.
Absolutely, and that's what's so exciting. And I mean, one of them, one of my favorites, is called Quaoar, Quaoar, and that KBO is linked to the indigenous tribes that lived around the LA basin, Los Angeles basin. But the archetype is that through song and dance, we can sing and dance our reality into being from a high level. A high level of vibration will produce a beautiful manifestation. So they believed song and dance was the core of magnificent reality, magnificent manifesting. And that's,
when you say that they, who is they?
The indigenous tribes. This was their philosophy. The peoples who lived around the LA basin many thousands of years ago.
Well, it's in the interconnection with the Southwest area, with the Anasazi peoples, who I have a direct lineage with, and so spent 3 years working with a shaman in the Southwest, in New Mexico. And so the Hopi, the Navajo, the Zuni, the Tewa, there were all these extraordinary tribes who were Mesa Indians, but they were settled. They lived in Pueblo. They weren't migratory. And so these are the beings, and they believe that when the Spider Woman sang and when she danced, she brought into creation everything that we see, whether it be the mesa or the mountain, you, me, the antelope, or the eagle.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful, absolutely, and that's exactly what that archetype is about. So this is so related to quantum physics because it takes us back to the principle that everything is frequency as an underlying principle of the universe. So what we have to master going forward in these coming years, I believe, or what we're going to be given the opportunity for in a very big way, is really understanding the principle of frequency, understanding intention as focused thought, keeping your frequency high, and then bingo, we don't have to push and stress and effort and write the business plan. It just magically happens, bingo.
Can you just investigate that slightly further? What does that mean exactly? We don't have to write the business plan.
Well, in that, I think we've grown up in a world of efforting. That's the 3D realities, effort and work. And, you've got to work hard to get a house. You've got to work hard to get a car, etc. All of that will become much more instant if we can just shift our frequency in present time, and all of a sudden opportunities drop in for us. And I'm sure you've been through many times in your life, Stuart, where this has happened. You're at a high level of frequency, you're focused on one particular goal in life, and all of a sudden you read things, or a friend mentions something, or a phone call comes in, or you read, and bingo, it's manifested magically fast in a way that you couldn't possibly invent, because the universe is much smarter than we are. But it's all down to the manifestation always matches our frequency. So you're always looking for a frequency match. And if you're miserable and angry, you'll have miserable and angry experiences in your life. If you're joyful and loving, you will have those experiences in your life. The universe is just a mirror. It's just, in the higher realms of esoteric philosophy and quantum physics, as I'm sure you know, Stuart, that they believe that reality is just a hologram. It's just a projection of consciousness. It's not even real. It's just a movie. Well,
that's what I meant by suggesting this is a screen for our consciousness. It's not happening to us. It's responding to us. I mean, I'm using it very simplistically, but I'm talking about the celestial matrix and how it is. And of course, as we know, our ancient ancestors intelligently believed that it was woven together like a tapestry by the fates, and we were part of that. So it's just that you've mentioned something absolutely crucial about the the way that we strive to do, and evidently our world is in crisis with this over-fixation, this hyper-realized or hyper-focused do, which in many ways is what we discovered last year. Immediately we moved into what everybody called the lockdown, and I called the global pause. I have, you know, in active living one's life, meaning not in retreat or moving into sacred pilgrimage, I experienced a quality of stillness and peace, where divine intelligence spoke in the most extraordinary way. That's the illumination that I'm talking about. Now, the point is that the striving ceases and the thriving begins. So it seems that there's a point of quanta from an astrological perspective where we move from, I need to control this by planning, and what I need to do is to tune into what the planets are teaching me at this point. And as a result of that, we move into the quantum field. And thereby, we suddenly realize that it's done it for us rather than we needing to do it. I think that's the point that you're making, isn't it?
Yes. And you said it much better than I did, Stuart. Beautiful. Yes, that's exactly the point I was making. Because if we can live the planetary archetypes at the highest level of expression, and I will explain to the client what that means, or in my videos I'll explain generally what it means, then we are getting to a higher frequency point to bring in that wonderful information. And life becomes effortless. Last year, I think, was a beautiful expression, the global pause, because it really was a pattern interrupt for the often automatic processes that we're on. We get up, clean our teeth, have a shower, have breakfast, go to work, come back, watch television, go to bed, repeat the next day, repeat the next week, repeat the next month. And what we're in at the moment is a global awakening, a great awakening. And that's very clear. And the contractions that we're going through, the restrictions on our freedom, are part of creating that kind of breaking down to break through to a higher level of being. Because this coming year, 2021, is going to be quite a kind of, well, I don't use the word battle, but on one side we have Saturn, which is control and rules and regulations, and the other side is stuff that. I want to be free. Human rights, civil rights, been very prominent in various points in history where people have broken through to say no more. You know, we all need our individual freedom, every single living being, not just the people at the top, all of us. And that sense of collaboration for humanity is very, very strong. And I just want to pick up, because something else you said about the planets being teachers, and they absolutely are for us. And I think what's often revelatory for clients in sessions is to realize that their birth chart isn't just an internal map of their psyche, but it's also a photograph of the universe, as it were, at the moment of their birth. So the inner equals the outer, absolutely. Otherwise, I couldn't anticipate the issues in their life happening if I couldn't see it in their birth chart, which is their inner. And actually, that's why Carl Gustav Jung, as you may know, was a prolific astrologer, because it gave him shorthand to diagnose the problem with their patients, his patients, because he could see the psyche and the issues, and he could see, you know, the phobias or the depression or the stresses that was producing in their outer reality. So it is magnificent, this equality of the macrocosm and the microcosm, the outer and the inner, they're the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, suddenly my mind goes, where's, you know, okay, so there's a meeting point, isn't there, which is absolutely huge. Which is evidently, you know, to use the image rabbit hole, the rabbit hole idea has become debased, because we know that it takes us into a new level of consciousness, but is a bewildering level of consciousness. So it's been debased. But actually, it's beginning a new portal, isn't it?
Yes, at a higher level.
Which is obviously the field of quanta that you're talking about. You mentioned very deftly on a number of occasions through a series of beats in our conversation the archetypes, and I'd love, I mean, you know, because I was helped very copiously in the early part of my life by going into Jungian analysis and sorting myself out. And indeed, I went through a huge crisis 12 years ago, which of course was seen out through the shifts in my astrology, where the whole of my life changed again. I call it a cycle, planetary cycle marker. Everything shifts 180 degrees. And of course, so I'm very equipped with archetypal knowledge. And indeed, the 12 angels of Atlantis are representations of the 12 archetypes. My belief being that Jung was an Atlantean priest wizard in a former life, obviously, that had all of this information, and then through all the subsequent lifetimes, refined it, so that when Carl Jung, as we know, came along, he was able to equip us with this understanding of what the archetypes are all about. Could you just give us a quick sketch? Because I know that it's copious and it's multidimensional, but could you just give us a quick elemental sketch of the named planets that we're familiar with and what their archetypal values could be, so that we can just imaginatively see, oh, that's what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's interesting. Just on Carl Gustav Jung, his theory of synchronicity and his theory of archetypes was absolutely astrological.
Yeah.
It's straight from scripture. It's just so interesting. So if we just take our kind of regular bread and butter planets, as it were, your sun is how you express your energy. It's your level. So if it's in a fire sign, you generally have fiery energy. You'll be enthusiastic, love of life, bubbling on to a next adventure, strong physicality. Very broadly, that it's your energy. It's your sense of essential self. The moon represents many things. It's your instinctive reaction to life. It represents your experience with your mother, your own experience of mothering. It's your very much to do with your daily rhythm, I want to say. So it's very important in a relationship that you have compatible moons, because you may love each other to death, but if your moons are incompatible, it's hard to live with each other because you haven't similar daily rhythm. You want to go climb a mountain. He wants to burn incense. It's not going to hang together. So the moon is your instinctive self and what you need to feel deeply satisfied on a daily basis, what you require in your life, defined by the sign it's in and the house position that it's in. Mercury is the mind. It's our mindset. It's how we communicate, how activated it is, how much stimulation it needs in life. Venus is love. It's also our capacity for love, to feel self-love. It's our need for pleasure. It's our need for delicious food and home comfort, beautiful fabrics, and it's quite tactile, actually. Venus, Mars, so it's the female love principle. Mars is the male, obviously the male principle. God of war, aggression, assertion, drive, strong physicality, athleticism, leadership, goal setting, etc. It's a very simple, direct energy. Want to go run a marathon? Boom, don't check in with anybody. I go run a marathon. It's very solo. Then we get to Jupiter, which is the planet of expansion, the planet of higher learning, planet of philosophy, bigger visions in life, bigger horizons. It's a wonderful planet. Then we get to Saturn, which is very different. If Jupiter's the planet of expansion, and see where that sits in your chart. Saturn is where you've got to put the work in. It's the planet of contraction, discipline, head down, obey the boss, obey the rules. And if you work hard, you'll eventually get the promotion or the salary increase or whatever. So it's very much a disciplinarian. Then we get to Uranus, which is, the antidote, if you like. That's the maverick, the foreigner, the smash it all up. I've got better ideas than that. No, I won't obey the rules. I'm a delinquent. I'm a rebel. Don't know what to do with people like that, but they're geniuses. They're absolutely brilliant. Electrical minds, hyperactive minds, and they are about connecting. Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury, so it's connecting to superconscious, if you like. Downloads of information, which I'm sure is your experience, Stewart. So then we get to Neptune, which was discovered in 1846. There's always a correlation between when a planet was discovered and what happens in the world. So this is linked to fine perception, creatively and spiritually. It's linked to altered states. It's linked to unconditional love. It's linked to healing. It's interesting, when it was discovered that that's when the first spiritualist movement was set up in America. It's linked to photography, because again, this fine perception, this quality of light. So that is quite ethereal, actually, and beautiful.
And Pluto's far out from the planet Earth.
Pluto's further out, absolutely, and that was discovered in 1931. I think plutonium, splitting of the atom, and depth psychology. So this is to do with spiritual transformation. It's about death and rebirth, and that can be a literal death, or it can be a metaphorical death of an episode. But it's almost like if you imagine a tree falling in a wood, it's got to rot down before new life can spring up from that rotted earth, as it were. And where it is at the moment in Capricorn is the deconstruction of those five establishments, as you say. It's the rotting down of anything that is not pure and in integrity, in order that new life can spring up. And that's the process we're going through. So it isn't just, we're going through a heck of a grim time. We're going through an amazing, amazing time. This is green shoots appearing through the broken concrete of the old. And they will become more and more obvious as we get sort of further into the year. So those are my bread and butter planets.
That's beautiful. Thank you. So just you've shifted the degree and the vibration of what you were sharing with us, because having said all of this, suddenly you get to the point of, well, actually, we see that our world is crumbling.
Yeah.
What's wonderful about Pam is that she has this immense light that moves through her, where we feel, no, wait a minute, but Pam's being so optimistic. So it feels to me, if I may say, that you as a soothsayer, you as a sage, that you have secrets, because you're seeing how the planets are moving, and how if we can just associate with that dance, going back to what you were saying about, the Native American peoples, the indigenous peoples, dancing and singing another level of consciousness into existence, that you're dancing and singing another level of consciousness. Where does your optimism come from?
Gosh, I think it comes from my astrology. That gives me an amazing practical framework, but spiritual framework for life. I'm very excited about these new planets that are being discovered. And one I didn't mention that isn't that far out, it's just orbits between Saturn and Uranus, is called Chariklo. And I love to...
Could you say that again?
Chariklo, so Chariklo, Chariklo. And I love to talk about her because in myth, she was the wife of Chiron. She helped to heal Chiron because she's linked to the Buddhist ground of being, that immense permanent sense of stillness, the ever-present now. And she is very present in transitions of consciousness from life to death, but also in transitions of the evolution of consciousness. And in 3 days' time, she has a 62-year orbit, and in 3 days' time, she's moving out of the end of Capricorn, the old world, into Aquarius, the new world, the future. So she's cradling our evolution of consciousness.
We love that. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think that's going to be the day of the full moon, Leo.
Which is on Wednesday.
Yes, it's 3 days' time, isn't it? Thursday.
Thursday. I was hoping to do a very special event on that evening, because everything that I've been sensing is that it's monumental in relation to the development of the work that I'm doing. But I won't be. I'll be doing it on Saturday instead, so that everybody can come along. It's called enchantment. We're going to actually chant magic into our lives. So it will be an evening of a crucible of love and joy, moving into communion. So how wonderful, thank you. Now I can see so much of this I see, and then, as I move through life, because apparently I'm a material human being, I begin to see the matter, I begin to see the mater. She starts teaching me. So thank you for that. Yes. And the origin of her name is Greek.
I believe so, yes, I believe so.
It sounds very Tolkien-esque, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And what is bizarre in this, universe of synchronicity is when these in her case, a centaur, she's an asteroid, or the dwarf planets are discovered, the astronomers who discover them carefully choose their name, and so often that will link to a particular myth which we discover doing thousands and thousands and thousands of charts. It is the actual archetype of that planet, which is remarkable. So, you know, there's a wonderful sort of synchronicity going on there. But just to kind of second answer to the question you asked a moment ago, yes, the Leo full moon is going to be very powerful. There could be lots of disclosure around that time as well. So that's going to be exciting, and big heart energy, obviously Leo heart.
Well, this is when the beginning of Mr. Trump's impeachment begins, the court hearing.
Is that right? On the 28th?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, some very remarkable things happened last week with the inauguration, meaning that Mr. Biden used language and language formation that no other president has used. So a linguist who's a client of mine has actually tabulated all of the new words that Biden used in his inaugural speech, which was 21 minutes in duration. Isn't that fascinating? Because we know the sequence of 21 and how it disturbs in a very positive way what's happening within our molecular energy. So he was actually dropping into our consciousness elixirs that were to do with a bridge between thought and feeling, because after all, the American nation has been stirred in a very cantankerous way over the last 4 years, and many people are suffered and insecure. And so he was bringing in a new linguistic. It's, you know, there's just an observation of what's taking place on a broad leadership level that is also configured within what you're describing.
And I think there's still a lot more to come for America, actually, because if I look at their chart, they're having a what's known as a Pluto Return. So Pluto's coming back to its natal place of 1776 exactly next year. But there will be a lot more to come, a lot of volatility, a lot of turbulence, more to come. First few months of the year, I think, well, rest of January and February, pretty turbulent. Late March gets easier, and I think potentially sort of late May to late July look better as Jupiter moves into Pisces too. But there's a lot to come in the world, because we have to witness the collapse of the old to fully. You know, you can't, when you're planning to build a new house, you have to demolish the old house to give you space on that site to build a new one. And we're going to be living in a demolition site for a year. In fact, correction, we're going to be living in a demolition site for a while, because that demolition may continue until 2024, because Pluto doesn't fully move out of Capricorn until 2024. So we're gonna, but it's a process, but we've entered the new, because there's a shift of momentum from the old world to the new world. Jupiter, Saturn, and any minute now Chariklo moving into Aquarius. And actually in early February, you've got this massive lineup of planets in Aquarius that we haven't had since February 1962. So we will be getting a very big glimpse of what Aquarian energy is about in a very short time, couple of weeks' time.
Amazing. This is so exciting. And of course, I can say, you know, yes, because I lived through the 60s, as you did, you know, and we saw the social revolution that took place. I think it was 62. No, 63. There's a photograph I've got somewhere of me carrying a Ban the Bomb banner, which was on the front page. I mean, I'm in a riot in front of the US Embassy in Grosvenor Square, which it no longer is, here in London. And, you know, hair down to here. And of course, it was a great shock for my father when he saw that his son was turning into a revolutionary, which I wasn't. I was just protesting. So in other words, we know that the 60s was a time of immense social upheaval. What we're seeing today is a similar venture, except highly, highly intensified.
Yeah, absolutely, totally. And those themes of revolution, demand for equality, demand for greater freedom, demand for greater respect for all, whether it's, you know, women's rights, gay rights, civil rights, whatever it is. The 60s were a boiling pot for that. And they were really the seeding point for what we're coming into now. We're vortexing upwards into the next layer of that, if you like. But this year, the big themes of freedom, truth, disclosure, rebellion, revolution, and awakening. Those are the really big themes for 2021. So it's incredibly exciting. The other thing, Stuart, as a very simple soul myself, I get huge solace and nurturing in nature. I'm in nature every day. I have to be in nature. And my life, I keep it incredibly simple, actually, even though the mind is kind of going pretty buzzy a lot of the time. But generally, being in nature, that's what holds me. Because nature, you can see divine intelligence at work in every moment.
Mm-hmm. And when you say it holds you, I mean, I feel that all the sentient people that are tuning into, whether it's in this moment listening and watching us, or in the recording, because this will be in the library of recordings for the deep dialogues. This is actually recording 26, I believe, or maybe 27. Which, if anybody's, no, don't go there now, but it's on dianathevoiceofchange.com, as well as theangelsofatlantis.com. That automatically it become your contribution to this series becomes a key that opens up the consciousness of what I was hoping that, from a vibrational point of view, this extraordinary conversation that we're having would be a tool or an instrument that would actually open up a deeper understanding. So when you move into nature, what is it that holds you?
I think it is just, it's the way God intended it. In that we human beings, as you said earlier, Stuart, we live in cities, we think we're smart and sophisticated and clever in our modern lives, but we're insulated from observing that divine intelligence at work, really. And it's plugging into nature, particularly in a month or two when the spring growth comes up. It's electric. I can feel it. It's new life coming. And because there's so much ancient woodland around here, I can just kind of tune it. I hug trees. I feel their heartbeats. They've got different heartbeats for different trees. There's nurturing that happens, which is so profound that gives me an incredible grounding. I think in Japan they call it forest bathing, and they've discovered in research it has huge benefits, mental health, etc. Which I know it does. There's a kind of decompression from the mind into the body, into the sentience of feeling and grounding and textures in nature, bark on trees and listening to birds and watching that bright blue sky this morning. And I become a child. I take out my elderly neighbour's young dog and throw balls for him 1,000 times. I'm a child. I have no phone. I'm as free as I was when I was a child. And I love that. And that cultivates in me whatever is happening in the outside world. I'll never listen to mainstream news ever. I'm free. I'm a free being, and a grounded and a nurtured and a reinforced being. There's a sense of foundationalism coming when I'm in nature, and that's my bubble, particularly at the moment. I don't want to hear the bad stuff because that's all just a different timeline, a different reality. I'm not going to feed it and strengthen it with my attention and my energy. I'm on the high road. I'm taking the high fork.
And do you bearing in mind the richness of what you've just described, which is beautiful, and it's sort of what's on the tip of my heart, so to speak, on the tip of my tongue, in my heart, from my heart, is, God, I want to come down and visit you in the spring. And
if you're allowed.
I know. Well, by that time, I feel that so much of the astrological shifts will have swept out the nature of what COVID is all about. I feel that over the next 6 weeks, 7 weeks, we're going to see extraordinary shifts within the consciousness of COVID.
I really agree, and particularly around the spring equinox, 21st, 22nd of March, there's another big wave of energy coming in, like we had December 21st last year, and that's going to, awaken more people and take us to a higher place.
That's wonderful. I'm going to be doing an online retreat. Because obviously I can't be in Egypt, but I'm going to be doing an online Egyptian retreat, which will all be about honoring the priestess.
Oh.
Which, in fact, have been studying for many, 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 many years, and all my, going to Egypt twice a year for the last, well, certainly the last 20 years, but running retreats there for the last 12. I started at the beginning of last year, and of course we had to leave 3 or 4 days early because of lockdown. Pam, do you feel that astrologically you were predestined to be in the New Forest?
Yes, for now. For now, I love the trees. I love nature. So for now, I don't think I'll live here all the time. I think I'm going to end up in Europe. That's what I'm working on with my vision at the moment. But yes, for now. And I think astrology is something that I've done in many, many lifetimes. So the dance goes on is how I feel. I've even had some real evidence of who I was and what I did as an astrologer, which has been wonderfully validating. So I'll start from zero.
Yes, and it's interesting, isn't it, that well, anyway, moving into personal issues, but there's an immensely powerful druidic energy around you when you move into this power of the way that you speak of your understanding, your accomplishment, which is obviously very refined and expansive. But at the same time, as I intimated at the beginning in my introduction, it's so wonderfully down to earth. It's the go-to astrologer. So I can see that, you're a lady that has reached a point of really understanding her métier. You are singing the song of your soul.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I don't know. I was just lucky. I was just lucky that I stumbled into it, but I think I was.
You and I know there's no such thing as luck.
So
it can be a useful term to use when we disclaim responsibility. Now, your soul led you, right? Your soul led you,
and I'm grateful every single day. I love what I do. I love to help people. I love to help them shine their light more brightly in the world. And yeah, that's what I'm meant to do. I mean, what else would I do? So that's what I.
This has been such an extraordinary conversation. From the bottom of my heart, I really want to thank you for, wow, I'm sure everybody would agree. Unfortunately, we don't have a chat box on this particular new streaming device, but I will be going to my Facebook page and reading all of the statements, and I've asked people to put up questions, so I may come back. I'm not going to tsunami with countless questions, but there, what I'll do is I'll annotate or edit and find if there's anything there that I can't deal with personally, I'll come to you and ask. But please, may I publicly now invite you back, because this has been so extraordinary. I mean, what you're giving us is a wonderful understanding of the landscape of what we're moving through at this time, and you do it with such grace and such humor and such optimism that I just think we need that, because wow, what a year,
very a year. And I really appreciate how hard it is. So I'm not skipping away and thinking, I really appreciate the gravity of it. But
it's all well for you. There you are in your trees.
Exactly. So I don't want to, but I really hope that what I can offer with astrological understanding can help people who are struggling. That's my hope.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, what you do is you give us hope. You see. You give us hope. And of course, within suffering, the suffering becomes almost terminal in that moment because it feels so acute. We lose meaning. And what you're doing is you're beginning to shine that light and say, hey, come over here and join me, because I can give you meaning. I can show you meaning. I mean, I feel we're both very similar, because I've developed a very new linguistic over the last 18 months, 2 years, about the miracle mindedness of the universe, all as a result of what the angels have given me, which they started giving me, they gave me when I met them, which is in 87, but through an acute patterning of awareness when I was introduced to ultra-terrestrial beings who worked with me for about 3 weeks. And this would have been it's just before the millennium. So it was 1999. And I moved from the sanctuary of Chelsea, where I've lived for years and years and years, to Primrose Hill, so that I could have a promontory I could be on a promontory of a view of the city. And that's, of course, when I was working also at Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, which was an extraordinary project. And that's when they came through to me and gave me a lot of prophecy about this time. And it's all weaving its way through in the way that you're describing. This is a pattern, but now let's look at the frequency. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
It's been a joy. It's been really a joy, Stuart. So thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Bless you, bless you, bless you. It's just been, and I'm sure everybody's, I can hear applause from the angels and also the people watching in. So, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are watching in, is there anything specific? I noticed you said there weren't any projects, but you do have your, is it weekly or monthly astrological reads on YouTube?
Twice a month. I put them out twice a month. Occasionally I've got an extra, it's usually twice a month. I've got my 2 books, I've got lots of teaching videos. I am stepping back from client work, I'm afraid, just to create, to stop the 7-day-a-week endless work and to create more space so I can do more research into these new planets, which is what I really want to do.
So this successful lady, everybody, you see, yes, by reading the stars, you can also be materially conscious in the way that one needs to be on this planet. And of course, to go to your website, it's thenextstep.uk.com, isn't it?
Yeah, or PamGregory.com is the shortcut.
Ah, okay, PamGregory.com. Fantastic. Yeah. And everybody be aware of all of the posts that I'm putting on Facebook, because we are doing this remarkable enchantment on Saturday evening, and the places are going very, very fast. So, go now if you can and book on. And of course, if you don't get newsletters from me, please send your email address or put it on my Facebook page. Send it by email. It's very simple, stuart@stewartpearce.com, and click become a subscriber on all the videos on YouTube. And thank you for tuning in. Pam, you've been wonderful.
Oh, it's been such fun. Thank you so much, Stuart. God bless.
Bless you. Thank you so much.